I'm just ready to watch the chaos unfold from the Lakers.
Would you fall for me like I fall for you?
Alright, everybody, welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're gonna get right into things here today. So, today, we are talking about the Los Angeles Lakers. And more specifically, we're talking about trades regarding the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, it's funny because actually all day I was brainstorming kind of what I wanted to do for a video today. You know, I was making thumbnails and stuff like that, trying to come up with something that I thought I wanted to talk about. Eventually, I decided I wasn't probably going to make a video today. But some of the thumbnails I had come up with were like a Russell Westbrook, like, is it time to trade him? And like a Ben Simmons, where is he getting traded? Or could Russell Westbrook and Ben Simmons be traded for each other? And I was coming up with all these sorts of thumbnails, you know, Joel Embiid MVP thing, which I might go with for tomorrow's video. Because actually I've gotten more interested about that as the day's kind of gone on. But it's crazy because I was making all those thumbnails, and right when I was doing that, the report from Shams and Woj came out that you know, the Cleveland Cavaliers are nearing a trade to acquire Rajon Rondo. And this actually fits in perfectly with another idea I had thought of that just never made a thumbnail for, which was like, how are the Cavs going to recover from the loss of Ricky Rubio, right? And this trade pops up and it's like, oh, that makes total sense. And I'm like, wait, I have the perfect video idea. And so that's what this video is, I guess, to prologue this video. But yeah, essentially the Lakers are in trade talks with the Cavs to move Rondo there. And so initially that's what we're going to talk about, and then we'll kind of move into some other stuff regarding the Lakers trades and stuff like that. But first off, trade as it goes for the Cavs, super good idea. Go out and get another veteran guy that can kind of hopefully replace some of what Rubio was doing. Now, I don't think Rondo was going to have the on-court impact maybe to the extent that Rubio was having, because Rubio was having a fantastic season. If I go check his stats here real quick, I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but he was, you know, he was scoring the ball decently. He was doing stuff for them. And I know in that lineup next to Darius Garland, he was very helpful just to this team to win games. So he was averaging 13 points per game, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists this season. So it sucks to see him go out for the year, but them going out and getting Rondo, I think, is a very smart and good move by their front office there. But it's kind of interesting, right? So when you're initially looking at that, it's okay, it's a good move, right? You're doing that. But the only time Rondo has locker room issues is when he's with younger players, right? And that's what the Cavs roster is. So that would maybe be the one thing that I'd be skeptical about, that, you know, he's going to bring his certain locker room presence to that team, and it typically only clashes well with older and veteran rosters that understand what he's saying and, you know, maybe respect him a little bit more because they've played with him for a longer time, right? Or played against him or whatever it may be. But typically when he goes to a younger locker room or a team that's trying to rebuild or whatever it is, he clashes with some of the personalities in the locker room, and it doesn't go that great. So I hopefully, once they do end up kind of figuring out the logistics of this trade, I'm assuming the Lakers maybe get like a second for him or something like that. It's not like he's playing much for them anyways. I think he's getting like 15 minutes a game or something like that. Only averaging like 4 points per game. Let's see, he is averaging a whopping 3 points per game, 2 rebounds per game, and almost 4 assists per game. So he's doing his thing when he's on the court. Obviously not playing terrible, but we know what Rondo is at this stage in his career, right? And I think it's a good pickup for them. I think the only thing to watch a little bit could be the locker room stuff, but who knows? Maybe this even furthers the development of Darius Garland and just continues to make him a better player. As for the Lakers side of things, again, you'll get some sort of compensation back from him, more than likely draft compensation, which will be good for you since you know, you're missing all those first round picks and everything like that from trading for Anthony Davis. And you know, a second round pick isn't nothing, but, you know, it can kind of sweeten up a pot a little bit in a trade or something like that. So that's good for them, especially as trade season seems to be rolling through the window for the Los Angeles Lakers, as it's actually super funny because I saw this post yesterday where it was LeBron angrily walking away after the end of one of their games, and it was like, oh, that's everybody's getting traded walk. And that's exactly what it seems like it's about to be this time of year for the Los Angeles Lakers. I think coming into the season, I feel like I had a more realistic look on this roster than some people. Again, Lakers fans typically are hard to justify realism with, because typically you guys are very up and down when it comes to looking at your own roster. But I knew the Westbrook thing compared to the Buddy Hield trade was a dumb idea, in my opinion. And although I thought some of these pieces could really do something for him and haven't really been that much for him, there have been some positives in the guys that they signed, but most of those positives are not the older guys. Now, if you're looking at some positives, Avery Bradley was a decent guy that they brought in. Obviously, Carmelo's done his thing. And then other than that, bringing Dwight back has been decent for them. DeAndre Jordan has been pretty abysmal for them. Malik Monk has done his thing, which I thought him and Kendrick Nunn were going to be super good signings. Now, Kendrick Nunn hasn't gotten on the court yet for them. But who knows how that's going. I'd assume either they're going to trade him or kind of wait it out and see if he can get on the court for them. But yeah, I mean, there's been some bright spots and definitely been some negatives. I think the defensive side of it, the record, the spacing, that's all kind of been highlighted. But they've had some bright spots, even though the season hasn't gone the way that they wanted to this point. A lot of that, I think, falls on Anthony Davis. LeBron has been playing out of his mind, and I think a lot of people are expecting stuff out of Russell Westbrook that he just isn't. And so I think Russell Westbrook, considering all things, has actually played fairly decent for his standards and for what we know him to be at this point in his career. Again, there's been some young guys that we didn't see really coming to be decent on this roster. That would be Austin Reeves. He's done some things. He had that game winner recently. He's averaging about 6 points per game for them. The typical, as NBA Instagram would call it, LeBron white shooter that he somehow ends up always to get with these Lakers teams. THT, I think Lakers fans' expectations on him have kind of slowly worked their way back to realism. Now he's been decent, averaging about 10 points per game so far for him. And then actually a guy that a lot of Lakers fans have been wanting to get more playing time and get himself a full contract for is Stanley Johnson. I think that really shows to what this team needs, and that's an injection of youth, an injection of smart defenders, shooters, stuff like that, right? Stanley Johnson, for the most part, is kind of all those things. He's a lengthy forward. He can go out, he can score the ball a little bit, he can play some defense, and help the team out in that way. And although he's never been a great three-point shooter, there's other guys that you maybe bring in for that role, but I think he does what maybe they wanted a Trevor Ariza to do. And that's just kind of be a decent defender out there. He's going to have, he's going to fight and all that. He can score the ball a little bit, like I said, and just kind of make some stuff happen. And so when you look at that, you look to see what these trade things are going to be. And I think it's clear that Westbrook, they're going to either find a way to move him or they're going to have to move like an Anthony Davis to really make major moves across this roster. And I don't see them moving Anthony Davis. I think the fact that they've had success with him and they look at him as the bridge guy after LeBron, because the Lakers themselves don't want to put themselves in the position that they were in when they lost Kobe Bryant. When he ended up retiring and everything like that, they went, and even towards the end of his career, they went into just the laughing stock of the league, right? They bundled themselves up with the Knicks and said, hey, make fun of us, right? And they don't want to go back to that, right? Now, they do have the market of Los Angeles, and I think they've proven that they know how to make roster moves and stuff like that. But if you don't have talent on your team, and if, without having picks and stuff like that, if you don't keep an Anthony Davis, that does a lot of detriment for the future of your organization in their minds, and I think rightfully so in their minds. So when you're looking at that, you're looking at other trade guys that could come across on this team. And there's not really a lot. If you're looking to try and move some money, there's a THT, there's a DeAndre Jordan, and then there's a Kendrick Nunn, because I believe Kendrick Nunn's on a $5 million contract. So I want to say THT's making like 11, 12. I can check that real quick, but I know that DeAndre Jordan's making like $9, $10 million per year, right? So if you're looking at that, there's some stuff you can kind of make happen with that salary, especially if you were able to package it with a Russell Westbrook who's making over $30 million. Now, if we're talking Russell Westbrook movement, there's a lot that can happen, right? I think you're looking at bringing in role players. I think I was watching a Sporting Logically video earlier, and I agreed with a couple of the trades that he drew up, that's going to be like your best type of scenario trade-wise, and that was one where he was trading Russell Westbrook to the Dallas Mavericks in exchange for Reggie Bullock, who's had a bad year for the Dallas Mavericks, but he's making about $10 million. Dwight Powell, who's a well enough big, right, that you could start alongside AD, I think, and could play more minutes than a guy like Dwight Howard or whatever can at this stage in his career. And then I believe that they were getting Tim Hardaway Jr. in that trade or whatever to kind of help make the money work, which he's a little bit pricey, I think, on the Dallas Mavericks end of things, but you are also getting Russell Westbrook. I think you're almost kind of trying to sell Westbrook at that point for mediocre players that can complement what you have on your roster. The other trade I think he drew up that I liked as well was the trade to the Knicks, where I think Alec Burks, Evan Fournier, and Nerlens Noel were the pieces moving in that. I know the Knicks really, like Knicks fans themselves, really don't want Westbrook on the team, but the team itself has struggled. We know Westbrook is a floor raiser, especially if he goes to an environment like that where, yes, you could call Julius Randle a star, but there's not really a guy that's by far and away, like, the organization sticking behind him as the number one. Like the Lakers, it's LeBron. The Rockets, it was James Harden. Even with the Wizards, it really was Bradley Beal, right? If he goes to the Knicks, he can be the number one for that organization. I mean, I think that's where Westbrook is at his best. Now, the Mavericks thing could work. That would depend a little bit more. But a trade like that is what you're looking at to get your best value, I think, out of Westbrook. And if you can do something like that, I think you maybe don't have to scramble as much when you're trying to find trades for some of these other guys to try and like make the money work and everything like that, because if you're trading Westbrook, you know, there's a lot easier ways to make a 3-team trade or something like that happen, where moving money around is a lot simpler for you as the Lakers. But speaking of contracts for the Lakers, I was talking about DeAndre Jordan's contract, and he is making 2.6 million. For some reason I thought he was making $9 million. So yeah, there's actually not as much money that you can move off this team as I was thinking. Rondo, the 2.6 off that team should be nice. I'm assuming that the Cavs can eat that, unless they're going to be sending back a player, which if they are sending back a player, that would be interesting to see who the Lakers are trying to acquire off towards the end of that bench. That's cheap, because obviously both teams are in kind of a winning mode. And then yeah, so that leaves you money-wise. Sorry, Westbrook's making 44. Gosh, I forget how big his contract is. But Taylor Horton-Tucker, he's making about 9.5. And then Kendrick Nunn's making about 5. And that's really all your money behind Westbrook that you could move around. So about $15 million. It's something that you can kind of make stuff happen with. It's the big issue is not having the draft capital, because that almost is a Karis LeVert level salary, right? That's $15 million. Karis LeVert makes $17.5. You send one of your $2.6 million contracts that way. They send it maybe to another team or whatever because they don't want it or anything like that. And that makes that money work for you as the Los Angeles Lakers. But you don't have the draft capital to make that happen, which is where I think a Westbrook trade really, really matters. And that is why I think like a trade to the Knicks, where if you were just sending Westbrook for Evan Fournier, Alec Burks, and Nerlens Noel, all those guys are on 3-year deals, and the Evan Fournier contract looks to be god-awful of a contract. So I don't know if you're going to have to put in draft capital into that. And if you can squeeze like a second-round pick or something like that, like I said, again, if you can get that second-round pick with Rondo, you can get another second-round pick from the Knicks. That's a little bit more draft capital that you build up for yourselves with this Westbrook trade and with these smaller trades, that when you do move some of this money, I think going out and getting a little bit of a bigger name guy around these guys is more possible, like a Karis LeVert. Now, I don't know necessarily if the Indiana Pacers want THT or Kendrick Nunn for Karis LeVert. That seems very low in my opinion of an offer, and stuff like that. But there is definitely areas where you could try to figure out where you can send this money to go and acquire a guy. Now, it's very difficult if you're trying to come up with trades to make this happen, just because you have to be looking at teams that are willing to do this, and there's not many teams that are really super willing to make these trades happen with the money that they're going to be receiving. Though the Lakers, since they made the AD trade a couple years ago, they are starting to get some more first round picks on the latter half of that. So kind of towards the end of that, obviously, I think their 2025 and 2026 pick are tied up. It doesn't show it on Fanspo. But their 2027 and 2028, they might have a little bit more flexibility with pick wise and might be able to send those away. So you could potentially have like 1 or 2 first round picks, maybe a pick swap or something that you'd be able to work into a trade. Again, that kind of comes down to the nitty gritty logistics of trading in the NBA, which genuinely I'm not going to dive into to figure all that out just to eventually find a Westbrook trade. Again, there's teams that you can look to make something like that happen. I don't think the Rockets is a realistic thing to trade him for John Wall, though I think John Wall would fit better. It just doesn't make sense for that to happen. The Thunder do have the cap to eat a Westbrook contract, and I don't know if they'd be willing to or not. But honestly, he wouldn't fit terribly with their team if he started. You put Josh Giddey on the bench, run Shea at the 2, or you could run all 3 out there, as both those other guards next to Westbrook would have the size. I think the only thing is he takes the ball out of some of your young players' hands. Though I'm sure OKC would be a little bit more willing, as it's kind of a reuniting of him. And with that final playoff spot play-in spot being a little bit open in the West, it's a potential that could be a trade possibility explored by the Lakers. In something like that, you'd maybe be targeting a Derek Favors as money return, and then what that's going to do for you there is, if you're bringing in Derek Favors and stuff like that, if you are able to make the money work and stuff like that for the Thunder, which I think it should, because I believe they have a good amount of money open, as they're not even paying anybody over $10 million on their entire roster. So then what you're doing there is you're freeing up money to play the buy-in market if you wanted to do something like that, and not necessarily have to take on like 3-year contracts like you would with the Knicks, with all their players that you're kind of locked into potentially for a little bit longer, unless again you do move them again in the future. And so really kind of it's going to take the Lakers a lot of kind of finding the perfect guy to go after with the money that they have on the perfect team with the right assets that they have that would be willing to take on like a Kendrick Nunn and Ateon Horton-Tucker, or would be willing to take on Russell Westbrook just to get, certain amount of assets to this team. And I'm positive that there is somebody out there on one of these teams that has Westbrook's value as hey, if the Lakers come to us with this offer, we would totally be willing to take Westbrook, right? And I'm sure there's the same thing, like there's definitely a handful of teams out there that look at THT as a guy that you could pick up as a valuable asset, and even Kendrick Nunn, right? If you can get Kendrick Nunn on the court, even for the Lakers, he can be a good player for them. I think if he had been playing, that would probably have been best case scenario for them at this point, because he could have averaged 15 points per game even off the bench for them. Like, he's a pretty good player, especially can score the ball pretty well. And that, I think, would have done a lot more for them at this point in the season when they're starting to look for more trades to happen, had he played. But obviously that's not the way it rolled out. And so their value isn't quite as high as I think the Lakers maybe thought it was going to be going into the trade deadline. But it is definitely trade season in Los Angeles. LeBron is definitely ready to make moves. And we know LeBron doesn't want to waste a year, especially at the point he is in his career. The guy he's not exactly young anymore. He's 37 years old and only every year looking to win a championship. I think that's what we know of him. He's a guy that wants to win. He's a guy that's chasing those 6 rings that Jordan has, and probably even wants to get more. And he's never satisfied. I think none of the greats ever are. And so that's why it's definitely, buckle down if you're a Lakers fan. You're probably going to see a lot of stuff being moved around. And I wouldn't be shocked if this is like a Cleveland fire sale, right? We remember back the year after the Cavs traded for Isaiah Thomas, when they traded away Kyrie Irving, that mid-season, the fire sale that they had where like half their roster was gone for different guys, and all the moves were made so that they could, acquire George Hill and try and make a better run at the whole thing. And it kind of almost worked for them. They actually made good moves and improved the roster at that point. And I could totally see another fire sale like that happening for the Lakers this year because, simply put it, the Lakers are a disaster this year. Really, the team is just not built cohesively. I think the GM got a little wrapped up in bringing in a number of veterans that wanted to play and not thinking entirely of the fit. I think if you're looking at safe guys on this roster, though, like I said, I listed them out earlier. You can definitely look at them. But there's definitely plenty of guys on this team that could easily be moved. And I think another safe guy, I don't know if I entirely mentioned, in Malik Monk. I think he's definitely going to be on this roster headed into the later part of the season and could be something big for them because he's only on a 1-year, $1.7 million contract. So he's not really movable for assets that you're going to get back that will be better than him. Just because, unless you're packaging him with Westbrook to try and make that trade better overall for yourself, and maybe not so negative in a long-term sense or anything like that, or maybe a pick sense, there's not too many ways where you're really going to move him and get adequate value back. So I'd expect him to play a bigger role for the Lakers as we continue on throughout the season. But I'm super interested to see how these trades kind of boil up for LeBron. Where do you guys think Westbrook is going to end? How do you guys feel about the whole Rondo trade thing to the Cavs? Again, I think it's a good idea by both teams, to be honest, especially with Rondo not getting super significant playing time. And yeah, I'm just ready to watch the chaos unfold from the Lakers. I hope you guys enjoy. It's been your boy Dom, and yeah, I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.